very good evening to all of you. Thanks for joining us here on the Sunday edition of the Urban Debate. I am Afrida Rahman Ali. Our top focus today, viewers, officials across India have busted as many as 3 drug rackets. The big one here in Mumbai, where a rave party, a drugs rave party, was busted by NCB officials who went on board this cruise liner undercover in plain clothes and conducted a 7-hour-long raid, at the end of which you have Bollywood superstar Shah Rukh Khan's son Aryan Khan and 2 others arrested. They have been sent to custody till tomorrow, booked under the NDPS. Now, that is the first development we are tracking. I'll quickly get in Sandhya before I talk about the other 2 instances. Sandhya, if you can give us the fresh updates that we are getting on this, because right now we've just shared information that those arrested have been sent to NCB custody, which means including Shah Rukh Khan's son Aryan Khan, the other 2 will have to spend the night in jail.
If we talk about what happened in the court, so court has actually sent all these 3 accused, which is Aryan Khan, Arbaz, a merchant, and Munmun. All these 3 are sent to NCB custody till tomorrow, which means tonight they will be at NCB office. They are not sent to JC because once they will be sent to judicial custody, then they will have to go to jail. But as of now, they are sent to NCB custody so that further investigation can take place. So they will be spending night in the NCB office of Mumbai, which is based in South Bombay area of the city. Now, what transpired in the court? First and foremost, the important thing. Before the court hearing started, NCB officials told Mirror Now that all these 3 accused, Aryan, Munmun and Arbaz, these 3 are as of now accused of only consumption. Now, that makes a huge difference here, Afrida, because once the agency says that and they are booked under only consumption sections, that means that as per 64A section of NDPS Act, if a person who is accused of only consumption volunteers for a proper and complete medical rehabilitation and de-addiction, that person shall be, not can be or maybe, shall be given complete immunity from prosecution under any NDPS Act. So that's an important part here, Afrida. So this means that these 3 people can go to the court, tell the court that we are ready for a complete medical de-addiction program, and they will have to be given full immunity from prosecution under any section of NDPS Act. That's an important part. So before the hearing started, this is the information we put out. And this is exactly what NCB's lawyer also told the court, that all these three people are booked for consumption. Afrida.
Yes. Okay, important point. There's a distinction between a drug consumption and a consumer and a supplier. In this case, like Sandhya points out, the charges are only for drug consumption. But let's talk about the 2 other instances. In Bengaluru, again, 140 kilograms of ganja was seized by NCB after a tip-off. Here, the interesting part is how these drug cartels are reinventing themselves, using food app executives now, the delivery boys, to transport drugs. That has been busted. And the 3rd case busted by the army, where around 30 kilograms of contraband substance worth 25 crore rupees recovered along the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir's Uri sector. Now, what is important is these 3 instances are illustrative of 3 major challenges that the country is facing today. The first big challenge is, yes, the rot runs deep and the network is massive. Policing, from what it appears, is not adequate, nor is the surveillance system that is currently in place. A lot of this goes undetected. The second big challenge, the prevalence of drugs among youths. And it's not just our kids we are talking about. It's coincidental that you have a Bollywood superstar's son implicated in this. But fact of the matter is India's youth are falling prey to addiction, to recreational drugs, party drugs, and are often misled into associating drug consumption with a certain coming of age. That's the big challenge again for India's youth. And the third big point that we are going to raise today is whether India is no longer just a transit point, it's becoming a consumption hub. The demand for drugs have increased monumentally, leaps and bounds, and therefore to understand the gravity of the situation, We have with us today on the Urban Debate, let's welcome Mr. B.V. Kumar, former Director General of NCB, and also Jitendra Kumar Ojha, geopolitics and security expert. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Urban Debate. I want to first play out what we have in terms of our inputs coming from the owner of the cruise liner, Cordelia, where the drugs were recovered and the arrests made from that rave party. And of course, the current DG of NCB also spoke about the recent cases. Let's quickly listen in.
I have nothing to say. We are just cooperating with the authorities. That's our standard procedure. And that's all I have to say. We are working very closely with the authorities. I don't know. No,
what about the drugs were consumed or drugs were...
We don't know. We only operate the ship. We don't know any of that. We are just the operator. The ship left after we were cooperating with the authorities. The ship left and she is coming back after the cruise tomorrow.
देखिए लगातार हम लोग इस पर काम कर रहे थे। जो मुंबई की टीम है उनके जोनल डायरेक्टर हैं मिस्टर वांखड़े, उनके नेतृत्व में इंटेलिजेंस गैदर किया जा रहा था और इनपुट्स लिए जा रहे थे और इसी के आधार पर कार्रवाई की गई है। और कार्रवाई जो है जब स्पेसिफिक इंटेलिजेंस मिल चुका और ये पुख्ता हो गया कि ड्रग्स कैरी किए जा रहे हैं शिप पर, तब जाके कार्रवाई। डॉक था, अभी पोर्ट से आगे नहीं बढ़ा था, लेकिन गोवा के रास्ते में था, तभी इसको इंटरसेप्ट किया गया है और पैसेंजर बनकर हमारी टीम घुसी थी और उसके बाद डिकॉय करके और फिर उन लोगों के बारे में पता किया गया जिन लोगों के पास ड्रग्स पोजीशन में हैं या उनके पास से मिलने वाले हैं, तो उसके बाद कार्रवाई की गई।
Mr. B.V. Kumar, you heard the current DG. No doubt the NCB deserves credit for cracking this and busting this rave party. But we are here to talk about the larger malaise today, sir. We want to know that, how we, of course, so many unanswered questions at this point about how did the drugs get there? Who are the suppliers? Where are these drug cartels operating from? And while, arresting the end user may be the starting point, do you believe that the job of the NCB actually begins here?
No, this is an eye-opener. We are having a large inward smuggling of cocaine, MDMA, which is also known as ecstasy. It is a party drug. And we should be aware that large quantities of cocaine are being smuggled into India. MDMA is also being manufactured within the country from some of the pharmaceutical units, which are not able to survive based on their production of paracetamol or some other drugs. Now, I would like to mention how exactly the drugs are coming into India. It starts from Colombia. From Colombia, it goes to Mexico. From Mexico, it comes to Nigeria. From Nigeria, it comes to Dubai. And from Dubai, it goes to the 4 largest consumption centers, namely Delhi, then Goa, then Bangalore. These are the 3 major centers, so also Mumbai. Now, if you take into consideration the seizures that have been made by the DRI in the last few months, after the Mundra seizure of 3,000 kilograms of heroin, around the same time in Delhi, they seized something like 37 kilograms of cocaine from a godown and also a residence in Noida. Then before that, 303 kilograms were seized of Tuticorin from a container, which are supposed to have contained only logs, wooden logs. Then earlier to that, also in March 2021, from a Sri Lankan boat, 300 kilograms of cocaine was seized, along with 5 AK-47 rifles, as well as 1,000 rounds of 9mm live ammunition. So this is not the only thing. What is important is the various gangs that are operating in Goa, for example. The Russians mafia are the largest operators in Goa. Basically, they cater to the Russian tourists who come on a package. The package includes their accommodation, then food, and plus probably the party drugs and other things. So also there's of late, the Israel mafia has reduced their activity there. But the Nigerians have established for the last 5 years their own gang who are catering to the needs of the drug addicts and other things. The Indians are also playing a smaller part, but nothing to compare either to the Nigerians or the Russians. What is important is that Delhi is slowly becoming an important cocaine available center because large quantities of drugs are being smuggled to Delhi. And that's a worrying thing for all the enforcement agencies. For example, West Delhi has been identified as a drug zone.
Yes.
And earlier to that, I would like to mention one case where in Australia, when 55 kgs of cocaine was seized, the information came to that almost 1,000 kilograms came to India, out of which 300 kilograms landed at Bombay itself. These are the type of quantities that are coming into the country. And it is heightened. What is important is our youth getting addicted to the strong drugs like cocaine. When a person gets addicted to cocaine, it's very difficult for him to come out of the habit. And he cannot survive without the next dose of cocaine. In the case of heroin, probably it's easier, much easier, relatively, to rehabilitate him. Whereas in the case of cocaine, even, for example, there are certain doctors performing operations who are addicted to cocaine. They cannot perform the operation unless they have a dose of cocaine. So cocaine is a more potent and dangerous substance abuse drug. So we have to sit up and think as to how to combat this menace. And India is slowly becoming...
Absolutely, sir, which is why we decided that, while the focus tends to be on a Bollywood kid, we have decided that we are going to talk about this as a larger challenge for the country and its youth. Mr. Ojha, do you concur that, there are massive loopholes in this system? Because as you heard Mr. Kumar listing out for us, drugs are being smuggled with impunity. There are Nigerians and Russians operating in broad daylight, and they are visible. And these are networks that are operating, which is the worst kept secret probably, yet we don't see the kind of focus and the kind of priority that should be entrusted and that should be given to this issue. Where do you think really are the loopholes in our system that are being exploited so easily?
Look, Frida, I believe that after Second World War, or maybe right from the beginning, there is no insurgency, there is no terrorism, there is no mega cartel, crime cartel, which has survived without drug trade. As far as you're talking about institutional loopholes, neither our domestic security institutions nor our external security institutions are in a position to contain something of this nature. I entirely concur with previous panelists, but I would like to give a little larger picture. And I believe that some of his information, what he's talking about from Colombia and other these things, these are little obsolete, little maybe 10 years or 15 years or 20 years or so. What has happened over the years? Golden Triangle in 1970s used to contribute to 70% of the opium cultivated. Now that has been completely reduced. Afghanistan is producing 85% of this opium. So when you very nicely pointed it out that there are networks, clandestine networks, which are operating with impunity on our soil. And these are not only one area. Drug is larger part of this thing. What has happened last 30, 40 years, of course, these law enforcement agencies have also advanced, but so have these crime cartels. They have advanced. And what they have done, they have integrated counterfeiting of currency or drugs or extortion or these street gangs. All these are, I'm not saying that every level they are integrated, but there are some larger forces, international forces. They have come, they have managed to integrate them, they protect them, and then of course they utilize them for various purposes. In my understanding, this is an act of war which is happening, silent war which is happening on against India, on Indian territory. And these drugs are multi-edged weapons. What do? You destroy population of a country. Then you raise resources for these kind of terrorism and organized crime on the territory of the country you are targeting. So we have to be mindful. If 85% drugs are being, is being cultivated in Afghanistan, and who's controlling it? Taliban, we know, for all practical purposes, it is a proxy. And without Pakistani deep states, global networks, they just can't operate. And not only here, securocrats, former intelligence officers of United States who are now, political sociologists, professors they have become, they are saying that whether gangs in Luton to Birmingham to somewhere in Paris to even Switzerland, and all these are sophisticated places. Go to Africa, go to Far East. So all these places, they have managed to integrate these gangs and they are operating. And these people, once you are involved in something of this nature, you are already compromised. And let me tell you, nowhere in the world, this kind of network can flourish without concurrence or without connivance of a malignant knot within our security establishment, without our police and maybe political establishments. This has been going on. So fact is that, we are surrounded by, such hostile countries.
We'll discuss. We'll come to it about the complicity, because even in this Mumbai drugs case, we found that there was a huge oversight on the part of the port authorities. At least that is what the cruise liner owners are suggesting, that the job of doing the checks and
much
balances
simpler.
were
What
with the
you're
port
saying is much
authorities.
simpler.
Mr. Kumar, I want to know
Yes.
from you that, here you have, right. Yes, we'll
Yeah,
come to
tell
that
me.
in a bit. Mr. Kumar, the drug cartels are also reinventing their modus operandi. I mean, if you see how they are using delivery boys in Bengaluru, they go undetected for the simple reason that they have managed to game the system as well. And they're doing it cleverly, they're doing it consistently. Do you think the BRI or the NCB or the kind of bodies that we have in our country responsible to contain this menace, do they have enough resources? Do they have enough teeth to tackle this crisis?
No, it's like this. The Narcotics Control Bureau is a intelligence-based organization to tackle large-scale smuggling drug cartels. But what we did when the NCB was formed, we delegated the powers to various authorities so that a large force of enforcement personnel can be put in place. For example, we notified the state police authorities, we notified the border security force, the Assam Rifles, and the forest department, because sometimes ganja is grown in high altitudes in Kerala. Like that, different organizations have been notified as narcotics control officers, so they can enforce the provisions of law. So the NCB, of course, is doing a lot of good work. For example, this Bombay seizure is an eye-opener, but that's not the end of it. See, in this case, the cruise owners are very much responsible because it is their responsibility, like in the case of airlines. They do check the baggage thoroughly. So also the Industrial Security Force, they also check the baggage thoroughly to find out if any contraband is there. Of course, the customs authorities are not there at the port for this particular cruise because it's a internal movement of the ship from Bombay to Goa. So they're not subject to customs checks. But at the same time, you cannot reduce the responsibility of the cruise authorities to ensure safety and also security of the ship and its passengers. Now, here is a case where the passengers, particularly the high-profile passengers who were involved in this case, have brought their luggage with the drugs and other things, and it went undetected. I am very sure if proper check was done, then this could have been detected. That is one part. The second part is even the NCB should have checked the cabins of these passengers, because sometimes when the party is going on, the entire stuff is not on the table. Probably some member of the crew or one of the event managers might have concealed it in some part of either his cabin or any of his colleague who was accompanying. So that part of it also is very important to pursue that type of investigation as a follow-up. So 1 day remand is very reasonable as far as the NCB is concerned. More than NCB, probably the accused are concerned. But at the same time, NCB has a lot of work to be followed, not only at Delhi, at Bangalore, and probably within Bombay itself, because the origin was, in this case, Delhi. The cocaine and MDMA came from Delhi. So from that point of view, further investigation is necessary. What I'm concerned is the larger question which you posed in the beginning, whether we are becoming a nation of drug addicts. The last survey that was done by the Ministry of Social Justice showed in 2004, there were only 2 million drug addicts in India, whereas in 2019, it became 22 million. The latest report of the United Nations Organization on Drugs and Crime shows that 1/6 of the Indian world production of drugs are consumed within the country. So you can understand the nature and the dimension of the problem that our youth are facing another thing. And as I mentioned earlier, once a person gets addicted to cocaine, it's very
but then
difficult
again,
for them.
like you said, the NCB cannot operate in isolation. It requires a collaborative effort, isn't it? Mr. Ojha, you were also referring to the fact that this is a war at another level and it is damaging us from within, which Mr. Kumar very rightly said that it is our youth that are at stake. And the figures that he quoted just goes to show that, we are completely ignoring that our youth are falling prey to this addiction. But how do we sort of, get the attention to this issue and to the fact that it requires a collaborative effort at the national level? Of course, the agencies must come together. But are you also saying it requires a collaboration of other nations, since you're making it so clear that there is a larger international conspiracy and there are drug lords sitting in remote corners of the world using these pawns over here, and we may be able to get hold of them, but how do we get to the kingpins?
Certainly, I think all stakeholders who are talking about democracy, free society, they have to come together, including corporate leaders,
Yes.
because large amount of this money, which is laundered or generated through drugs, it gets into industry and commerce. It is destroying that also. As Mr. Kumar pointed it out, 1/6 of our population is addicted. Let me tell you that, all these data are estimates. The whole thing happens so clandestinely that it is impossible or near impossible to get accurate data. But, once this kind of crime cartel or drug cartel or is operating right in our neighborhood, and the force or the country or whatever you can say, deep state of Pakistan, which is so hostile to us, even this could be a pawn. Let me tell you one thing, that, Chinese deliberately destroyed, the Golden Triangle area because they felt their population was being impacted, and this will have China has a long history, even British, how they were imposing drugs on them. But from 60s or 70s, they took a very conscious decision and they followed it up. It's not that Golden Triangle has been, production has been completely eliminated, but this has substantially reduced. They have made it sure that their youth is protected. So what I think, it's not possible for one agency or enforcement alone. State and society both have to come together at one level. Psychological health is an issue. So I think the whole orientation has to change, and it's not that we can create, forces only for drug containment. Then the cost will go very high. It will become unsustainable. So like, these crime groups, they are integrating a whole range of things. Similarly, we need far stronger and robust mechanism for rule of law and both internal and external security, not military security I'm talking about. These kind of assaults through organized crime and drug and counterfeiting, all these have to be integrated, and we need to build a much far robust capacity of Frida. This is what I would say.
Yes. Yes, we need to make the system robust. I'll just take closing comments now, Mr. Kumar. The point about hostile neighbors, the fact that you have a Pakistan and an Afghanistan again, the fact that Pakistan, far from restricting this problem, would probably be interested in making it part of its nefarious design. You have an Afghanistan again, a breeding ground for a lot of these drugs with the Taliban in power. Have our challenges only become bigger, Mr. Kumar?
Yeah, only 1 minute as far as Pakistan is concerned, but I would come back to the major suggestion given by our distinguished guest who was also on the panel. As far as Pakistan is concerned, their economy entirely depends on drug smuggling. Their main source of funds for the budget is about 100 billion rupees of drugs are produced and smuggled outside their country. To India itself, they send something like $1 billion worth of drugs through India, probably for being either consumed in India or transit through India. Now, as far as the concerted action between the agencies are concerned, already DRI in a large way conducts intelligence operations based upon which they make large seizures. But NCB itself has drug liaison officers posted from by the British government, the RCMP, and also the American drug liaison officer. They're all based in Delhi, and they're constantly in touch with the NCB and sometimes with the DRI also. So there's a lot of exchange of information. We have close liaison with the RCMP, the Drug Enforcement Administration of the USA, and the National Criminal Intelligence Agency of UK. So there's a lot of exchange of information. But the question is how much we are able to utilize their services or their help in sort of dismantling this international smuggling drug cartels. That is important. So we have to be proactive to sort of invite these agencies to help us. That's what I would like to suggest. And I'm sure in the past
yes, what you're telling us is that the modus operandi is no secret, the drug routes, the money trail is no secret, yet to sort of crack this network once and for all is a challenge that would require cooperation from within, of course, among agencies and across borders from other countries as well. Bollywood, for instance, is, of course, infested with the drug menace. We have seen the rich and the famous habituated to this menace, and they find ways and means to subvert the system. In this case, it was busted, what happened with the cruise liner, but probably a lot of it is going undetected. That's the challenge, and the bigger challenge, like we said, is addiction among the youth of India. Is the government of India paying attention to this? Something that we have raised today. Thank you so much, Mr. B.V. Kumar and Mr. Ojha for joining us, Mr. Jitendra Kumar Ojha for joining us on the Urban Debate this evening. Thanks for your time.